Ah! Hey, folks, welcome back to the Pulse. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat. It's 11:30 Central Texas time. Welcome back to the Pulse. I'll tell you what, I'm salty today. So this is going to be a good one. I'm in rare form. And maybe it's because of the bull market has begun. At least that's what I'm telling myself. And a lot of this stuff is just you just kind of lean into it. You got to bite down on it sometimes. You know what I'm saying? This is one of those days. And I'm really encouraged in the Lord. And I had some great conversations with a number of people recently. And I'm really thankful. One of the things that Steve says all the time is once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that is really interesting. It's like, we've taken the red pill, we've gone down the rabbit hole, and now we see the matrix for what it is. It's pretty crazy. But today is number 24 with Steve Staggs. This is the right side up. And so let's bring him in and say hello to our friends. What's up, Steve?
Hey, man. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad that you're here. I need your help. I need your counsel today.
Well, if you're salty, I'm glad. I'll kind of keep some space there.
No, what's really
it's
great
good,
about
man.
it? Yeah, it is.
We need to see you fired up a bit.
Yeah, and I think that a little dramatic flair can't hurt a thing.
No.
I just love it that you're willing to do this with me, Steve. It's such a cool stream of consciousness. We got a little bit of structure, but it's always good to see you. I was actually worried about you because my phone was unable to communicate with you, and I'm like, Steve, man, are you okay? I was about this far from
versa.
I was about this far from calling your wife, and so we got ourselves together. We're a little bit later today, but I'm so glad that our friends are in the chat. We got David Lee. He's on the road, listening from the road, and here's the coolest thing I just want to share with you about David Lee. David Lee and I got connected through the Compassion Cartel and, of course, through Hex and Pulse Chain and Texan and all that stuff. He's the guy that traveled 7.5 hours to come to my dad's funeral. What's amazing about him, though, his wife has been dealing with stage 4 colon cancer.
Yeah.
And they've been going through all kinds of stuff. But this amazing thing happened. And my camera's freezing up occasionally here, so bear with me. And they got into a trial, and she had surgery yesterday. And amazing report from David Lee, and not in the sense of medical report, but the report of the peace that transcends all understanding.
Wow.
And he attributes that to the community of people coming around him. I felt that when he came to my dad's funeral, right? These are the very practical things that it's not like, woo-woo spiritual stuff. It's just knowing, like Mike Costello, right? Like we got your back, even though we're not right there, we're right there, and we're with you, David and Stacy Lee. And anyway, he's listening from the road. I know he's got travels. The kids are going to be coming home. I think they're going to have a nice weekend together. And there's a lot to be said for the joy in the moments. Do you find that to be the case? Kind of like you have to kind of live in the present. I tend not to, but.
Oh yeah, I think one of the greatest things, and I don't know how you measure them, quite frankly, because they're all great. Is the Lord really emphasizing to me and then building in me, the appreciation, we would describe it, stop and smell the roses, smell the coffee, take time to enjoy, just take time to enjoy. It doesn't matter what is, but just feel that experience of just enjoying, being grateful, just thinking about the wondrous things that are around you in not some mushy, syrupy kind of way,
Right.
but just in an authentic, this place is really pretty cool.
Yep.
Doggone it, Lord, you really know how to do things right. And just pausing to experience that appreciation and joy. So, yeah, right on, David. You're a man who knows how to do that, and safe travels, and we're with you as well.
Yeah. Give all those kids hugs.
Yeah, right
And
on.
Stacy, a hug, big hug too. He knows how to do it. Blue
Yeah.
collar grunts here. Nice. Sneaking in a stream at work. That's fantastic. Thanks for being here. Thanks for carving out a little time from your work for us. Hex Force One, good morning, gentlemen. Good to see you. Mike Ostell, he's pondering the fine line between enough waffles and total sugar coma. You know what? This is a good leading indicator.
Yeah, right on, Mike. If we hear a thud, we'll know where it's coming from.
What I love about it is it's not talk of setbacks. Talk about sugar coma is a good sign. Is a good sign. Mike, good to have you here. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, right
DJ
on.
Bomber, yes. Good evening. Good to see you. Hello, great friends. Alon is here. Taryn's back. Good day. I'll join you in a few minutes. Have chores to complete first. Absolutely. That's the beauty of this recording. Watch at your own leisure. Robert, good to see you. Rendell, do you know Robert? Because I don't, and I'm glad you're here, Robert.
I don't, but welcome aboard.
Yeah, welcome aboard. Hexy Quinn was she is here. God bless David and Stacey Lee. Amen to that. And all. Yeah. Well, Robert, thanks for being here. So, all right. I told you that I literally had the theme downloaded to me today just because it's so big. We talked the last two episodes in 22 and 23. Fantastic. I think the second hour of 22 is like the must hour people need to listen to. If you missed episode 22 in the second hour, we went into this concept of the transfer, and we talked about this slide that Steve created. And we talk about left hand, right hand side of the slide. It's a great tool for us to talk about this idea of the upside down world versus the right side up world, or this one that's driven by mammon or money versus the kingdom, which is led by Jesus. And so, so today I wanted to talk about Luke 19, and I'm going to put up, I'm just going to, we haven't done this many times, but I'm going to kind of anchor us, at least in this first portion in this story. And I want every bit of color commentary you can possibly provide, Steve, to this, because you always have a unique insight on these things. So this is Luke 19, and this is 28 through 34. After Jesus had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. As he approached Bethphage and Bethany at the hill of the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples, saying to them, and of course, here's Jesus speaking, and we know that that's pretty important. They put it in red here. Go to the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, why are you untying it? Say, the Lord needs it. Those who were sent ahead went and found it just as he had told them. And as they were untying the colt, its owner asked them, why are you untying the colt? They replied, the Lord needs it. And then there's nothing else. It says they brought it to Jesus, which I absolutely love.
Yeah.
This story, many of us have heard, and this was in preparation for this triumphal entry into Jerusalem as king. What I think is wonderful about it is, if you put that in today's context, Steve, that's like me going, he's like, hey, my buddy Steve up there in town's got a brand new Corvette. You're going to go and you're going to steal it. And if he asks you why you're taking his Corvette, you tell him the Lord needs it. And I love it so much, but it speaks to the very core of this whole right side up thing, is to say that Jesus is alive and he speaks. And when he speaks, all things are prepared and come with that spoken word. Go, Steve.
Yeah, that is so fun. By the way, let's kind of start from the end and then work backwards and surrounding.
However you want. You always do it better. Yeah.
What's fascinating about that is, now pause for a minute, and it says, and The instruction he gave his disciples was, hey, when you start rolling this dude's Corvette out of the driveway, and he says, what are you doing with my vet, dude? Your response is, as you've just described it, right, is the Lord has need of it. Now think of that. Okay, what did the Lord have need of?
Mm.
He needed transport. Now, what have we talked about in the past about the pole and the ark
Yeah.
and all that? We are his transport. We are the mechanism of his transport. That's how he's chosen to design, his creation. That's part of the partnership that we have, with God in carrying out his vision and his mission and his purpose for creating. And so here Jesus has, he has an assignment. Remember, we've talked about the kingdom is about assignment and allocation. So what is it? Okay, I need you to go into Jerusalem. And when you go there, the first thing I need you to do is I need you to totally upset the business system that's happening in Jerusalem. I need you to go there and I need you to kick some booty. That's what I need you to do. There are dudes in there who have completely turned my entire economic system upside down, and they are stealing, they are thieves among my people. Now, what's interesting is that there's two kinds of thieves spoken of in the New Testament. One of them is in the description of the parable about the thief who comes in, to steal. And the question that Jesus asks in it, how would you keep the thief from entering in? If the homeowner knew that the thief was coming in, what would he do? Or another way we see is a description of the devil who comes to steal, kill, and destroy, right? The stealing, the type of theft that happens. Well, there's two kinds of thieves spoken of. One is the thief that operates in stealth. That's the one who lurks around in the darkness, who he just doesn't want to be seen. That's the one that Jesus said, if the owner of the house knew that the thief was coming, what would he do? He would bind the strong man. Why? Because he's there to stop the one who's operating in stealth in order to destroy. The second kind of thief is the thief that plunders in broad daylight, who plunders in the open. That's the thief that was operating in the temple. The kind of thief that operates in open daylight, that seeks to plunder those who are less fortunate. Okay? So the mission that Jesus was given, the assignment, was that he was to go into Jerusalem. We call it, the translators, and we've been talking about, it's called the triumphal entry, right? So he comes in there on a donkey, which, by the way, that demonstrates how the creation was designed to function in peace and order. In the upside down world, you never touch that donkey no one had ever been ridden on. You'd break it first. You'd make sure that he was okay with somebody riding on him. In the right side of world, that's a non-issue, because all of creation waits to hear from the voice of their creator to cooperate and participate in what he's wanting to do. Man is the only one who doesn't do that very well. But the donkey, he had no problem. Oh, my creator wants to hitch a ride. Man, I'm cool with that. But Jesus was supposed to go in there, and the way the translators describe it is den of thieves. Well, you have turned my father's house of prayer into a den of thieves. And that's in that whole description, if you look into the original language, is you've almost created an organization of plunder.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Well, guess what? What does business look like to us today?
Yep.
See? And one of the very first things that Jesus does with you is he starts turning your business model upside down. See? Now, when it turns upside down, guess what's happening to it? It starts turning right side up. Because what he's doing is he's showing you just the left side of the slide is what we're trained in. That's where the den of thieves, those who operate an open plunder, function. And one of the things that Jesus does is begin to demolish that entire model inside of you so that you can start operating in the right side up model where everything works together in continuity and agreement and in peace. So anyway, that's the end of the story.
Wow.
So in the language of the last couple of weeks with the slide, there's an assignment for us as well, and that's to move from the left side of the slide where everything is working, where business operates in the open as a mechanism and organization of plunder. It's designed to extract, to exploit, to enslave, to pool the almost inexhaustible resources that God and his man and his earth can produce. It has to contain all of that into pools so that in order to create the illusion of scarcity. That's the left side of the slide. And so Jesus's assignment was to go and turn that side, on its ear and begin to transition so that people can come fluidly without encumbrance and without obligation to the one whom they are attempting to get to know and serve and work with. So that's the mission. That was the assignment. Okay, so that was the assignment. So what was the allocation? Well, the allocation was the mechanism of transport. Now, all right, so how are you going to get Jesus from point A to point B? Well, okay, the Father's telling me the mode of transportation is in town there, tied up on a pole, okay? It's tied up there somewhere. Go and get it. And if somebody asks you about it, tell them the Lord has need of it. Now, we see these, we're taught to take these stories and partition them as if they are disconnected from their surroundings. So now let's look at some of the surroundings in which that Jesus preceded this, or Luke preceded, and to set the stage for this now assignment that the Father had given to Jesus. So in Luke 19, where we basically start, is Jesus coming into town, and this guy named Zacchaeus, who was a tax collector, was a small of stature, so he climbed up in a tree to see him. And anybody who's been raised in the church has probably sung songs about Zacchaeus. And so Jesus is walking down the road, and Zacchaeus looks at him, and their eyes connect, and Jesus says, "Hey, Zach, today I'm coming to your house." And Zach says, "Wow, you would actually come to my house?" And Jesus says, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, listen, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give up to half of all of my possessions if I have wronged anybody." Now notice what he said. "I'm a wealthy man. I'm a tax collector. I'm small of stature. I'm despised among my people. And yet I have operated with such integrity that I would give up to half of my possessions if I've wronged anyone." Now, if you go into the Old Testament economic system, he was to give 7 times the amount that he would have done wrong. So when you look at that, you go, wow, that guy is, so committed to repenting and getting his life turned around. I say, no, his life wasn't turned around at all. He was describing the integrity with which he conducted his business affairs. And hey, by the way, if in doing that, I have wronged anyone, I will make it good. Then Jesus says, oh, today salvation has come to both you and your household. Now, the thing that's fascinating about that is Jesus did not say one word to him about accepting him as Lord and Savior. Jesus did not say one thing about requiring him to be baptized. Jesus didn't say one thing to him about repenting from his sins. He just simply heard the attitude that was in him and the commitment to do right. And once Jesus says, man, I'm going to enter your house and have dinner with you and your family, that's all that's necessary to take you the rest of the way. What a picture. All that's needed is that we hook up and align with Jesus and he'll take us the rest of the way. That's as simple as it is. So then after that, and I'm kind of doing this by memory, so I don't know if you're looking at Luke 19, but as I recall, the next thing that happens is Jesus starts talking about a parable. And the parable he talks about is about a nobleman who is going away to seize control of a kingdom for himself and then return. If you go into the language, into the definitions of the original words, it says a man of noble birth is the way that the words, the definition of the words, the original words. Now, why did Jesus want to tell this story? He told this story because the Pharisees and the religious leaders thought that the kingdom of God was coming immediately. And so to dispel that, he then gave this parable. And the parable is the parable that we affectionately refer to as the minas. So this man of noble birth calls his servants together. He gives them these minas and he says, go out and do business with this until I return. In the language, again, the definitions of the words in the language says, go to the places and conduct business and manage profitably in the places where I am coming and going until I return. So that's like a present, this like a command for the future that begins in the present, that, hey, you go do these things, but you just don't go wherever you want to go. You go where I tell you to go, in the very places where I am trading and doing business. Now, what you just saw is the way I traded with Zacchaeus. Did you notice the transaction that was happening between us? I was coming into town. Zach showed interest. How do I know he was showing interest? He climbed a tree and was peering at me, just begging me to lock eyes with him. And the moment I locked eyes with him and we began to converse, he told me of the way that his attitude and the way he conducts business. Now, mind you, he's in a business that is despised among his peers. But his attitude of heart is what I'm looking for. And he expressed his attitude to me. And what he was saying is, I have conducted my business affairs with such integrity as I know it to be, that I will give up to half of my wealth to restore anyone whom I have wronged. Jesus says, that's the attitude I'm looking for. So Folks, when you take these resources that I've given to you and you go and you conduct business in the place where I am coming and going with the attitude of trading and managing your affairs profitably, and you will go in the places that I have told you to go, and you do the things that I have instructed you to do, and you learn to do that with me, then, then both you and your entire house will be saved. The destruction that is everywhere in the perverse business environment that you have been raised in, it will completely transform into a place of goodness and plenty. If you'll just learn how to conduct your business affairs with me with the right attitude. Okay, wow, that's pretty good. Now, what's then interesting about all of this is that he called his servants together. He gave them these resources. And then he went to secure the kingdom. And the way that the language, the original words is to aggressively lay hold of and seize control of a kingdom. Well, we know what kingdom that is. And there are other parables related to this that tell you how that whole engagement that was going on there, some of which I've written about in some of our writings. Well, lo and behold, the guys that that received some of the minas, they go out and they do their business, but there was a group that said, "Hey, listen, we've thought about this. This isn't what we want to do. It's not in our best interest for this man to reign over us. So what we're going to do is we're going to send a delegation to him on our behalf, and their mission is to tell him that, hey, we don't want him to reign over us. We would rather do this deal on our own." Now, if you back up and you take what's going on, what's happening there is you say, oh, now we have a contrast of attitudes. We're willing to take what you have that we did not first possess to do with it what we wish to do with it. We have no interest in you reigning over us. Now, what's important about this is in the kingdom there are two basic kinds of what we might call leadership or leading. One is in the form of reigning. That's an English word that we can use, that we typically use. And reign is to exercise governance over willing parties, over willing participants. So you don't reign in this context, you don't reign over those who are in agreement with you and cooperating. You reign over those who are in agreement with you and cooperating with you. What you do is the second word is rule. And rule is to exercise power that neutralizes and renders inoperable anything that is in opposition to the mission or the mandate. So you rule over those who are adversaries. So what they were choosing in this instance, when they were saying, we do not want this man to reign over us, in the context of the kingdom, it was, we do not want to cooperate with Jesus, with this Lord, to do and accomplish the mission that he has. We would rather do it on our own, in our way, in our manner. So now we have a contrast of attitudes. Well, the next part of the parable is that the nobleman comes back after securing his kingdom, and he calls all of his servants there to give an account for their trading, for their business activity. And we know the story. One says, "Hey, here's 5. I made 5 more for you. Here here, Lord, is your mina. I made 10 minas. I made 5 minas in return. And in each instance, the nobleman says, well done, and calls them faithful. So what is faithful? Going back to some of our previous conversations and streams. Faithful, being full of faith. Well, what is faith? Faith is that packet of power that comes through what Jesus speaks that then enables us to accomplish the mission that he's given to us, or what he has spoken to us to accomplish. So these men who were taking and working faithfully, they were full of the faith. In other words, they were full of what Jesus was saying to them as they conducted their business in the appropriate attitude of the kingdom. But then there was this one who says, no, 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 I'm going to give you back what you gave me. And it says when he came to to present what he had done, he said, I was afraid of you. I know that you are an exacting man, that you pick up what you have not laid down, you reap what you don't sow. In other words, he was calling him a jerk. You're a jerk. You're a guy who takes what he has nothing to do with. You steal from me, and you take this. Now, what we don't know that we can maybe talk about in a different setting is when he says you are an exacting man, he was actually referring back to the financial and economic system that God had set up in the Old Testament, and was calling him one. When you said you were an exacting man, you were actually accusing him of one of being outside the framework of Israel. You were operating in a perverse manner, so you were actually operating outside that defined structure. So he was actually calling Jesus, or the nobleman in that instance, he was calling him a thief. Now, never mind you that the nobleman gave him what he didn't have, and entrusted him to do whatever he wanted to do with what he was given to him, but still he came around with that attitude. Well, okay, once he did that, then the nobleman says to him, what I'm going to do is, and here's, let me back up make one more comment. What the man said, once he told the nobleman what he thought of him, in other words, expressing his attitude, he then said, I took and buried your mina in a handkerchief. Man, I'll tell you what, it is fascinating to me how often the translators can neuter significant statements that deprive the reader of really hearing what Jesus is saying. In the parable, the handkerchief, it's not a handkerchief, it is a headcloth for the dead. What he had buried the money in was the headcloth that was put and wound around a dead person's head. Well, what is the picture there? See, that is the picture of death, the intelligence that speaks and creates only death, while professing to be wise and intelligent. And he said, I took your mina, I buried it in the headcloth for the dead so that I could return it to you when you returned. Well, that's exactly what he did. And what the nobleman said to him, he called him worthless. You are worth less. Why did you not give it? In the translation say, why did you not take it and give it to the traders or give it to the bank so I could receive it with interest. Well, all of this may seem disconnected with your question, but it actually isn't. It's all part of this context. Okay. And so when Jesus was describing the parable, he was saying, why did you not take it to the traders so that they could trade my resources, so that in trading my resources, I could then receive a return in exchange for my resources, so that my resources could continue to be productive. After all, that's why I designed them. That's what they are created to do. That's why I gave them to you, so that you would keep them flowing in a manner that could facilitate trade, so that everyone involved in the trade could benefit and gain more than what they started with. That's how I have designed this thing to work. But when you buried it, you put it in the headcloth for the dead. You did not understand that there was life in what I gave you. You interpreted that as having and possessing death. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take what I gave to you and I'm going to give it to somebody else. And the guy I'm going to give it to is the guy that was most productive. And then there's this whole exchange about that Jesus goes through why to do that. Well, then the end of that particular story was, he said, call that man and present him to me, along with all of those who did not want me to reign over them. And what did Jesus then say that the nobleman did? He then ruled over them. And he rendered each of them inoperable. He said, bring them here, and in my very presence, slay them. They have chosen death, and so I will give them what they have chosen. They did not want me to reign over them to where they could cooperate and participate in the fullness of the life that I have provided them. I gave them what they did not possess. I gave them liberty to produce. I brought them into the fullness of my kingdom, and what they did is they chose to reject that. So I will give them what they chose. Slay them in my presence. Okay? Now we look at that as some kind of a, heavy-handed, cruel, almost act of retribution, but that isn't what it is at all. You have chosen, and when you chose, I will grant you what you have chosen. That's how my kingdom works. You are sovereign over your choice, and this is what you have chosen. Now notice what's happening here. See, if you go back to the story of Zacchaeus, the religious leaders were thinking, oh my goodness, doesn't Jesus know who this dude is? He's a tax collector. He is rejected by all of us. If there is one who can be a sinner, it is Zacchaeus. And yet, guess what happened? Zacchaeus is the one who had the attitude of integrity, of honor, of wanting to seek out Jesus, to pursuing him, and to coming into relationship with him. And Jesus knew it. They locked eyes, and guess what happened? The fullness of the Father's kingdom now became the kingdom that Zacchaeus and his entire family lived in. And Jesus' statement was, Zacchaeus, you and your whole household, salvation has come to you. Now that relates directly to what we were talking about last week in John 3:16, right?
Yep.
God so loved the world that he created, that he gave his only son. And hey, listen, when you believe in what the son is designed to do, then you escape the destruction that is in the upside down world. And not only do you escape it, but everyone who is a part of your household then escapes it. Why? Because the household begins to live in the reality of the kingdom. And when you do that as an individual, when you as a son or a daughter then come into that position and you start learning with the attitude of Zacchaeus and others to pursue, guess what? Salvation starts coming to your house. The destruction that is in the upside down world starts to shed and dissipate, and the life that is in the kingdom begins to take over both you and your entire family. And man, it's a real deal. It actually happens. So this attitude thing. Well, now let's look at the attitude of the guy with helping Jesus with the with his assignment. So the Father gives Jesus the assignment to go into Jerusalem and kick some serious butt. And what he's going to do is he's going to expose and turn upside down and expel the thieves who are operating in open daylight to plunder people through the mechanism of trade. Okay, Jesus needs transport. So he says to his disciples, as you've read the story, he said, go into town, you'll see, and when you get them, hey, when you start driving the guy's vet off, he's going to naturally wonder what in the world you're doing. Don't panic. Don't get weird. Just tell him the Lord has need of it, and he will release it into your care. Now, man, that's the right side of the slide, Matt. That's the way that it functions there. Now, we think about so often we marvel at in our Sunday school and church services about Jesus doing this, and how did he know all of this? Well, that is pretty marvelous. But the thing that gets me more than anything else is the guy who released his donkey. I mean, hey, that was a prized possession. That's why, you're using the word Corvette. I mean, that's right. It'd be like us saying, hey, man, I just drove in my vet. I haven't even put the first 10 miles on it. And some dudes coming in, a group of them are just driving off my car. Guys, what are you doing? To me, the greatest marvel is the guy saying, okay, you can have it, and releasing it to him without thought, without condition, without concern. No, okay, the Lord has need of it. Somehow there was something in working in him that he could hear the voice of the Lord through those whom he did not know. Wow. That is amazing. When was the last time you ever ran into somebody where you needed something and the Lord said, go and do this, you go to do that, and the person says, what are you got in mind? And they said, okay, cool. Whatever's mine is yours. Go for it. Man, that I can count on less than one hand, and I'm 72 years old. Usually what happens is you have a long litany of things that you are questioned about. And I could give you a lot of stories, in this very thing that was a hard lesson to learn for me personally, and as the Lord was peeling back the covers to let me see what was actually there. Well, go there and tell them this and tell them I sent you, and I do that, and they'd say, we're not buying that. Let me make sure that we have this litany of questions and qualifications and all of this stuff. And it's, wow, Lord, why did you send me into that nonsense? Man, that was painful. All I wanted to do was buy some groceries for my family. What the heck's that all about? See? They plunder in open daylight. And we're going to deal with that. Oh, okay. We're going to teach them how to live in the right side of the slide. They're in the left side of the slide. They don't even know they're doing it. They think they're being responsible. They think they are being honorable and good stewards of God's resources. The only thing they've missed is my voice. They have not considered my voice. That I will speak to them. All they have to do is ask me, and I will gladly tell them. And oh, by the way, what I'll also do is I will honor them for asking me. So now you start seeing these contrasts. So when Jesus has need of it, can you imagine what happens if on the left side of the slide, that never happens, Matt. It's not built that way because it's built on an extraction. Preservation of capital is a common term. Being careful for these scarce resources to make sure that we're good stewards. And good stewards is reduced to from a restriction standpoint, not from a release standpoint. It's always with why I should not give this, as opposed to why I should give this, which then goes right back to your own personal calling, unlocking global generosity. Why? Because generosity cannot flow unless there's an attitude of giving, an attitude of free flow without concern for scarcity. Man, that is a hard thing to deal with in the upside down world because the whole thing is designed around lack. I mean, why is it that we always go to the people who have a boatload of money? We said, well, they have the money. That you go to who has the money. Well, my question is, why are they the only ones with money? What happened there? How in the world have we gotten to a place where the abundance is limited? The blessing of abundance is limited for only a few to enjoy. Are you mean to tell me that's really how God designed this thing? Why is it that we can't, among those who call themselves followers of Jesus, why is it that we can't go to them and say, hey, the Lord has need of it? What's going on there? We have a friend that, I've shared this with Carter as well. It was a really hard lesson for him. Carter, you don't go there asking anybody in the project that Jesus has given you. You don't go there at trying to sell people on why it's a good investment to give you money. If you do that, then they rule you. And when they rule you, they will rule the vision that Jesus has given you to bring about with him. No. What you do is you simply say, the Lord has need of it. Are you the ones that he is asking to contribute, to allocate the resources he's given you to this particular project? If he is, obey him, do what he says. If he doesn't, then please don't do it, because he has other places for the resources he's entrusted to you. So you take out the whole obligation, salesmanship, trying to convince you to do things. No, just the Lord has need of it. Can you imagine what it would be like to work in a business environment where that was the norm, as opposed to almost a singular example in a book that was written 2,000 years ago? The Lord has need of it. Okay? So if the Lord has need of it, then let's do it. Quinn did it with the with the video the other night.
Yep.
The Lord has need of it. I want to honor my man Matt. He's my partner, and he's learning how to be my partner more every day, and I want to honor him. Actually, would you mind putting together some things that would honor him? I'll work with you. I'll be there with you. I'll give you the ideas, whether you know it or not. The attitude is there to honor and to bless, and man, did she honor and bless. Same with Brandon, Robert, everybody who participated in that. Hey, and oh, by the way, once we go there, the place we're going is to turn upside down the tables. We're going to turn this thing upside down, and we're going to totally dismantle that perverse system that is exploiting in open sight my people. Anyway, I'm personally pretty passionate about all of this, and so to me, the Lord has need of it. Man, if we could just get to the simplicity of that,
yep.
And then learning to listen and hear the voice of God through the voice of others and respond in that way, each one fulfilling their role, recognizing that everyone else has a role to play as well, and then start cooperating with each other in working with Jesus to accomplish the Father's vision.
Yep.
That was a long one, man.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we're at 51 minutes, dude.
Wow, that was a long sentence.
That was a long sentence. So I wanna point something out here. This is awesome. And I intentionally did not say a word intentionally. What you just witnessed, my friends, is we did not prepare ahead of time. Steve didn't say, I'm gonna put together a sermon on Luke 19. We just said, hey, this is interesting, and this is what came out. I want you to recognize something that just happened. And what just happened is Steve you just provided us with what I would consider to be an example of being a professional, right? In the sense of, I asked this question. I'm like, you know what? I'm really interested about this idea of the Lord has need for it. Because I saw that, because I've listened to you and we've talked many times about this idea of saying, if Jesus speaks to you something like unlocking generosity or whatever it is, and you can ask him, right? That's the whole point. It's not like, no, you can ask him and he'll speak to you. And in this upside down world, the assumption is that, well, and you said this in the last couple of streams, you're like, well, how am I going to pay for that? Right? We automatically go back to the left-hand side of the slide and say, hey, mammon, how do we work this out? Rather than believing in the spoken word of Jesus that comes along with its faith, but it also comes along with its provision.
Yeah.
And I think one of the interesting things, and this is, I'm going to provide a bunch of color commentary to what you just said, because this is remarkable. I point out one little section of Luke 19, and folks, I want to challenge you. Go into Luke 19 and read it. What Steve just did, I think, is really, really important. And it also goes to show you the power of the scriptures themselves. If you think about what's packed into Luke 19, there's more than a story about a triumphal entry. There's Zacchaeus, right? So what Steve did is he broke down the entire Luke 19 for us. And what I think is incredible about it is I saw something new. And that's the beauty of the scriptures, right? We talk about this and I go, okay, now I understand this in a new way. And there's probably many, many more things I could understand from it as well. But what I took away from all of that is to say, okay, you took the donkey and you said, hold on a second, let's back up to where Zacchaeus has the right attitude with the approaching Jesus. And I see myself in the tree going, yeah, I really want to catch eyes with this guy because I know that he's got the word, the direction, all this stuff. And you basically are saying, hey, inside of the story about the wee little man, what we see is somebody who wants to, with the right attitude, run his business. And to think that Luke 19 is actually a huge commentary on business and transactions in this economic system and world. And so here we are on this crypto channel. And Luke 19, what I think is absolutely amazing about this is, where is Jesus headed to? He's headed to turn over the tables inside of the temple. And that is an economic system that was created previously, that was one that was pillaging in broad daylight. And if you think about this, there's so many ways in which the upside down world is getting into and becoming an intermediary between your access to God. And if you think about this, what were they doing? They were changing the money so you'd have the right money so that you could worship God, whether you're buying the right things to sacrifice or whatever. So, what is so interesting about this is these are middlemen. And so often those that are pillaging, they're basically taking the existing system and they're putting themselves in the middle as a barrier. And they're saying, you got to go through me. Even the tax collector himself. And you think about this idea of what the system is. And what we're saying is that the right hand side of this slide is this kingdom, right? This is the way it's supposed to work. And what man has done is just gone his own way and said, no, I'm like the guy with the one minus that put it into the head covering and said, no, I'm not going to participate with you. I'm not going to see what you've given me as a blessing that I would then use to transact and create more. I will not let it freely go. I will not let it enter the systems of the economic system in which it can bless and protect. I'm going to hide it from everyone else. And you think about this world that we're living in. So many people are amassing so much, and we say, oh, your bank account is what your value is. This is the report card of whether you've been successful in crypto. And what's interesting about this is the commentary of Luke 19 for me is to say, all of these things are mine. I give them to you like this nobleman. And the question is, what are you going to do with it? Well, in my system, if you understand it in the right side up standpoint, that it freely flows and it actually produces value beyond a singular transaction. It is a tool that is a flywheel for blessing and protection and provision. And that when you stop that flow, you are stopping that blessing and that protection and all of the things that come along with it. What's amazing though is to go from attitude of Zacchaeus, right, to this idea of, hey, the whole plan of upending this economic system, which is extremely relevant to us today. And then this idea that saying, if I speak to you, you need to have the confidence that there's someone down the road who knows you're coming. And even if they don't recognize you at first, when you go to take the donkey and you say the Lord has need of it, they'll go, ah, okay. And no argument and no fist fights over that one. And I think the big story for me is, if I can, make this super practical to anyone, is one, do you have interest in understanding how to participate in a system that is abundant? Or are you looking for tools and mechanisms and ways in which you can put yourself in the middle and extract? When you participate in a way that is literally open-handed, generous, whatever you want to describe it as, it really comes from this idea of seeking him with the right attitude first. Because if you want to align yourself with the very nature of creation, you have to follow what he says.
Yeah.
Well, what he says is, this system that I have set up is meant for your blessing and your protection. It is abundant. And if you come in line with that, it flows. And I think what is so amazing about this is, I have, for all of my business career, done exactly what the upside down world has taught me. And that is, go out and go sell somebody on something. If it can be mutually beneficial, great, but go get yours. Go extract. And it's like, when somebody says, yeah, that guy can sell anything to anybody. And you go, well, why would you sell something to someone they don't need? And if you think about this idea of a new economic order, and I think about crypto, and I think about everyone who's hopeful of the future of what the pulse chain could do, and the Richard Hart ecosystem and all that. And I want to challenge you guys. The reason that we do this stream, the reason I'm like, hey, Steve, go. It's because this is real wisdom that is beyond, I think, man's knowledge, right? It's not that, Steve studied a lot and he's a smart guy. No, there are principles in this that have these promises that are showing us the very nature and character of who God is, how it fits with the system that's been created, and how it's meant to function. And what I'm just absolutely blown away by, because it's really practical for me and the work that I'm doing day to day and thinking about with crypto, is to say, if he said it to you, you can take it to the bank.
Yes.
Meaning, you don't have to pause. You do not have to, um, you know, go, well, I've got this idea, or I've got this, he spoke this direction to me, but I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. I think the big story to me is to say, people might look at you like, if you went in and said, hey, I'm going to go take your thing and the Lord has need for it. Well, don't say that if the Lord didn't tell you, right? Because
Yeah, that's
because
right.
that's how you get yourself, punched in the eye. I think what's more importantly, though, is if it doesn't start with the right attitude, and that's what's so brilliant about how you just described Luke 19. If it doesn't start with the attitude of Zacchaeus, right? Going, hey, I'm going to do this with integrity, the way that you've designed it. And if there's any fault in me, I want you to call me on the carpet here. But I think the practical of this that just strikes me is, let's say you're somebody that has tremendous wealth, right? Say you're somebody that's built big barns and you've put tons of money into those barns. But you're somebody who's like, hey, I really want to align myself with the creation. I want to follow what Jesus is, directing me. What I've also recognized is that we're all different and that he's given us different roles to play in this life. And
Yes.
some people actually have a giftedness in creating profit.
Yes.
And they also, I think in many cases, also because the Lord has need for it, are gifted with giving as well.
Yes.
And the idea of a free flow, and I think what would be so brilliant, and I'm going to go on a tangent here, Steve, because this is kind of fun. Let's say Steve and Matt have their own venture capital firm, big private equity firm, and we're big shots, right? If you were to do and look at how you would share capital or how you would invest in things, it's a whole different model when you're going, I would love to find people who have had a calling from Jesus and literally be a part of releasing the resources that he says to release so that they can be productive according to the system and process that he set up. We know, though, it's not set up that way because he had to come in and he had to turn over the tables. And I believe it's happening again.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. 1993, Jesus said, "We're coming after him. It's time. We're turning this thing right side up." And so, you're exactly right, Matt. And the thing is, we we can see it. It's not that we have to be, some kind of weirdos talking about what's happening, in the background that nobody knows as if it's some kind of a mystical thing. No, no, this thing is right there, smack in our faces. And guess what? We can look at that. And I know in a former day, I would have looked at that with some terror. Oh my gosh, the army is coming. No, no, the bad guys aren't coming. The bad guys don't have a choice any longer. Yep, right on, Taryn. That's right. And it's only just beginning, my friend.
Well, I just want to point out a couple things.
Yeah.
Just because, well, Carter's here. And it's so good to see Carter in the chat. Also, really great to see Hex Monkey mic drop. He's like, Steve just dropped the mic. Jacques Farrow, I would assume. I arrived at just the right time to hear all that message. Wow, fantastic. And then the only one. So good to have you here, guys. You know what's so cool about all this, Steve? It's so, we've talked about it many times. For those who have ears to hear,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It all starts with interest. And what a great, like, I didn't anticipate that this would be so layered and also, so substantive to specifically what we're dealing with right now in the current economic system. And I think that this really brings home, I didn't really think that it was going in this direction. And it's such a beautiful thing how Jesus does what he does, right? He prepared you in advance as a professional to be able to share that message. And what it gives me a tremendous amount of encouragement is that I told you this story. I haven't told this on stream, but Danny went to Malaysia and he was at a big conference with a bunch of rich people, and he texted me and said, "Hey Matt, there's some really rich people here. Maybe I could be helpful to you." And I'm like, "Danny, that's great. I mean," and I said, "Well, yeah, if you run into somebody, let me know." It wasn't but an hour later, and he literally met the exact right people we were supposed to know. We got on a call with them, and basically they they basically said to me, "This is what Jesus has been telling us for 15 years." Think about that for a second, guys. I want you to really think about this. When you align yourself with this structure of creation, right, and you seek his face, right, he knows exactly what you need. He's prepared you in advance. You're like David who fought the lion and the bear. And what happens is when you start listening to him, you go, "Hold on a second, you've been with me the whole time. Like,
Yeah.
hold on, all these experiences, all of these things, you've been waiting for me to come back because now I see all of these things in my life that seemed like difficult things, or this education, or this experience, or this difficulty, and you redeem them all. And you say, no, 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 I'm showing you that I've been doing this work in you this whole time. You're coming to the understanding, and you're now connecting and seeking. Get ready for this most incredible journey, which is work that I have prepared in advance for you to do." And if you align yourself with that, well, that's the thing that most people in our society are just dying for. Well, what's my purpose? Why am I here? Does it even matter? Here's the amazing thing. Yes, it's been orchestrated since the very beginning of time.
Yes.
But when we come in alignment with that, and I think that that's such an interesting thing about the benefits of life in accordance with the design, is that it's meant to be full, and it is meant to be, and it gives a whole new meaning to this idea of your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Because in some cases, what a lot of people think of is, hey, unzip the veil and let's walk into the golden streets, man.
Yeah.
But there's also something really amazing about saying, hold on a second, the kingdom could come right now in this moment. It's not what you think of a kingdom of expansive land as it is actually the kingdom in this transaction, in this interaction, in this relationship, in this mode of functioning that we would consider others in addition to ourselves. And that in this is the free flowing wind of the spirit, which is ultimately peace and joy and all of the things that are the benefits of it. Because imagine doing something that not only you absolutely love to do, you're completely wired and gifted for it, you have experience for it, it's profitable, and it is blessing, protecting in the nature and character of the one who created it all.
Yeah.
Like that, like that's like the whole thing wrapped up. And you go, I want to live that way, Steve. I want to live that way.
That was my vote.
Yeah.
That was my vote. And once you open this whole thing about today about once you see it, you can't unsee it. I mean, I remember when I was in that time of thinking, well, Jesus, this is so powerful. What do we do to get people involved in this, convince them that this is the right thing to do?
You don't
And
have
he
to.
said, hey, you don't have to convince them.
Yep.
Just give them a glimpse of my kingdom, and you'll never have to motivate them again. Just give them a glimpse. And man, have I found that to be true. And what I've also found to be true in there is you can give them the glimpse, but an individual has to be interested in the glimpse, because once the glimpse is light. I mean, it makes things visible that were
Yeah.
not previously visible. Well, guess what happens? Sometimes we don't like what we see, and so we choose to move forward. Well, that's for me was a revelation in itself.
Yeah.
You have given us the ability to choose, and so our choices are sovereign for us. That's how our sovereignty. You speak all the time about freedom and sovereignty. Well, what is sovereignty? What is freedom? What does that actually look like? Is it Is that I just get to do whatever I want to do, and that's freedom? Is sovereignty that I get to order all kinds of stuff around, including others around me? Is that what it looks like? Well, in the upside down world, that's what it is. Because sovereignty is now in our day is reserved for nations.
Yeah.
Well, guess what the nations are doing? Whatever they want. See, whether it's right, wrong, indifferent, they will do what they do because they have the power to do it. They have supplanted authority with power and then called their power authority.
Yeah.
No, that's upside down. You know, that that's what creates the mess. And there's rottenness in the center of it. And eventually that rot will come out and become fully visible, just like the rot that's in the center of the peach. You know, you don't look at the peach on the table that's rotting and starting to stink the joint up and thinking that it's at the peak of its power.
Right.
You don't do that. You say, oh, it's not at the peak of its power. It's actually getting ready to fall apart and disintegrate on the table. Well, that's exactly what's happening now.
Yep.
The rottenness is becoming so visible that the stench is everywhere. It's not at the pinnacle of its power. It's on the verge of its collapse because the very weight of its corruption is starting to bear on it with such force that it's just going to collapse, under the weight of its own corruption. So if we actually knew that, I mean, now let's take this move back to the slide. If we actually saw that or believed it, not intellectually, but we saw it, and so we say that's it, what would we do differently? Would we continue to try to prop up the left side of the slide? Or would we say, hey, listen, man, Jesus, I thank you for letting me see that this thing is rotting at the core and it's getting ready to collapse, and it is in a frantic state of trying to survive. Okay, Jesus, what do we do? How do we move left side to the right side? And then you look at that little slide and you see this push concept. And you were talking about folks out there with resources. Well, there are people out there that have resources that are asking that question. Jesus, why did you give me all this money?
Yeah.
Why did you give me access to all of these resources? Why did you put me in this position? What is it that you are asking of me? They're out there and they're wondering what the heck they did to get all of this massive amounts of income at their disposal and their control. They don't know what to do with it. I appreciated the one clip that Hexie put in about when you were interviewing Richard Hart, and he said, "Look, man, I got all the stuff I need. I can't buy anymore. I bought it all. I mean, yeah, there are other things I can buy, but why?
Yep.
I mean, that's just creating more, paperweights. I'm done." Of course, he didn't say those things, but he says, I've got it all. I've got all the things. Well, what did he do? He started moving to the real eternal riches, the riches of the people, the riches of, helping them do better, the riches of helping them live in the blessing, of life, that the community and the health and the vitality of the community is of a higher order than the vitality of money and what it can do. Money's only meant to trade. If you don't trade it, it's one of the most interesting things there are. It is the most highly sought after thing that we have, and yet if it doesn't move and circulate, it becomes worth less.
Every minute.
How's that work? How can something that's that valuable in our perception actually become worth less the moment we set our hands to it and take it out of its purpose? How does that work? And why is it really worthwhile? Why is it really worth? because it's only worthwhile when it performs its designed function.
Yep.
And just then you can go to the parables of the guy with the barns and stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
he's telling us he's telling us everywhere how the system works.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. You've been such a professional student at understanding that, and he's spoken to you. And I feel like that's a big part of what I'm supposed to hear from you is like, hey, let me show you how this is structured, right? It's not a mystery. It is a thing. And I appreciate that because it's not a woo-woo kind of spiritual thing. It's a very practical thing,
Yeah,
all the way up and down. The thing I wanted to make really practical and speak to is in I think 1972 in Bretton Woods, ultimately Richard Nixon pulled us off the gold standard. And this is an illustration of something that I think is fascinating when it comes to your writings on, combined with the writings on the 60s white paper. But I think it's important. We talk about this peach on a table. We talk about a system that's potentially going to collapse. And then we talk about Luke 19, right? Here's this idea of we're turning over the tables. We've often talked also about Lydia, and we talked about Macedonia, where there's a whole new system that's being created because they rebuked the slave girl and the spirit of Apollo's gone and they messed up our economic system. And that opened up the openings for the gospel in Macedonia. What I think is really interesting is that for people who are paying attention to crypto, they're paying attention to markets, they're seeing what's happening in this world right now. There's so many things that are being exposed, and a lot of the tools are being animated for that purpose. And light is being shed on things, and we're seeing the rottenness at the inside. But you said earlier, there are those who pillage in the daylight. And when I look at this idea of worthlessness, and we talk about money becoming worthless. Well, we recognize that if I can't get it through taxes, I'll get it through inflation. And, we're getting to this point where the system, because of sovereign debt being so high, to GDP, right? If you had really good GDP, you just grow your way out of your debt position. But the debt position has become so high. And the reason I mentioned Bretton Woods in this is that we decoupled ourselves from a mooring, and that mooring was something that was of value. And it's really interesting that it's almost as if that decision kind of gave us over to our desires. So if you think about this, I remember when I was a kid, my parents would say, you can ask for that for your birthday, right? Or Christmas or something, right? Like we were always in a mindset of it was very frugal and definitely a hangover from the depression of my grandparents. But it was one of these things where we would always sacrifice for something later. And what's interesting that's happened, I think, really in my lifetime, I was born in 73, is that you can have it now. And everything that's been formed in since this kind of fractional reserve banking system has come in is that basically there's no sacrifice and there's no waiting. It's you can have it now. And of course, in the West, we have all of this, more stuff, right? What you said about Richard Hart. This system is so rotten and is so on the edge of collapse that there's only one thing that the Federal Reserve can do, and that is print more money. That's the only lever they've got to pull. And here's crypto, right? And the things that we're doing is literally saying, how do we tokenize real world assets? How do we get back to something that's based on the structure and the elements of creation? For example, gold. It's not the, one size fits all answer to the problem. But what's interesting is what we're a part of here in crypto is it's a picture of an opportunity to participate and create and support a new system, meaning the tables get turned over. What are we going to do? What are we going to create as an alternative? And is that going to be aligned with the right-hand side of the slide, the
yeah,
kingdom? And I think there's a really good chance that this is the plan that Jesus has in the world, and that we're playing a part in that. And Richard Hart's playing a part in that, and then the people that see the pulse chain. And it's not just about one layer one, but this idea of saying, I'm going to give you a tool. You can either animate that for, in my nature and character or not. And I think what's so powerful about this concept of a transfer is that he's transferring his man. He's building us in a way that says, no, real life and real fulfillment and real abundance is actually aligned with me. It's when
Yes.
you go your own way that it's like, you know, destructive. And so I just, wow. I've had a bit of a breakthrough myself, but I want your commentary on this, because this is the one thing that sticks in my head as a catch. You could easily manipulate people with this.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is my warning. I feel like there are charlatans in our world who may have seen a glimpse of this, but they use it as a means of extraction.
Yeah.
And I see it in the religious kind of world, and all that stuff is preying upon. There are people who are actually generous, and there are people who are actually wanting to be. So discernment is really critical in this scenario. But there are people out there who are like, oh, the Lord needed it.
Yeah.
And I think we also have to be cautious. What do you say about that cautious nature? And I would assume listen to Jesus, but I've seen a lot of things done in the name of the Lord needs it that I'm not sure the Lord actually spoke.
Well, yeah, and we could probably do an episode on that question as well. That a few episodes ago back we talked about learning to distinguish between lookalikes. And the lookalikes on the surface, they look identical. We kind of use the example of a watermelon or a cantaloupe or some kind of a fruit. They look exactly the same. Which one is a good one? Which one is it isn't? And that's the way it is in the religious / spiritual world. Um, by the way, it's everywhere. It does not matter.
Right.
There's everybody. The thing that's common is they're trying to work an angle.
Yeah.
The thing is that you learn in the discerning dimension of things is that an author cannot speak apart from their character. So if you know how to listen to what they are saying, you know how to evaluate and extract the message out of the words they're saying, you know how to identify the character that is not just speaking but benefits from that. What you always see at the bottom of it and at the core of it is a self-serving element. There is a giving in order to get. Okay, now let's kind of, for practical purposes, that runs rampant inside the thing that calls itself the church.
Yeah.
If you want to get out of debt, give to the church. Okay, so let me see if I get this right. If I want to get out of debt, what I have to do is give to the church, and the church is telling me if I give to them, or it could be a minister, or it could be anything.
Yeah.
If I give to them, then I get some benefit. Okay, so let's back up here. So your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Oh, wow. Is that why whenever we see pictures in the scriptures about the heavenly beings singing and praising in the heavens, they're always talking about, and the glory of Jehovah is over the entire earth. They're not talking about his glory in heaven. They're always talking about his glory being on the earth. Well, how's that work out? Because I don't see a lot of your glory on the earth. Well, because you're looking in the wrong place. My glory is saturating the earth, and you can see it because the people who are operating with me have no concern for an outcome other than what my Father has prescribed. It's all they're interested in because they know there is an abundance. So let's think about in heavens, okay? On earth as in heaven. Okay, are there people saying in heaven, look at, if you got a problem, do this and you'll get your answer. But when you do it, you're benefiting me. See, the intention is to benefit another, that the mechanism is for the objective of benefiting the individual or the situation. That's not how it works in the kingdom. The individual is a part of a bigger whole that flows in the fullness of what that bigger is actually doing. And there's not a concern for personal gain in the midst of it. It's just assumed. See, I mean, does a healthy tree worry about how many pieces of fruit it's going to bear? It doesn't. It just naturally happens. There is such an abundance that is produced. You don't worry about who's picking on the tree or actually begging for them to pick on the tree. I don't know if I'm speaking in riddles or if that is making sense. But now let's take this by contrast. You were mentioning about, the gold standard and stuff like that. And maybe this will help it certainly gave me some insight. But it's part of understanding the rottenness that we're dealing with that would hopefully give us a peek into, maybe there's a better system, better approach to this thing. There was a time I was dealing with gold standard and all of that kind of good stuff. And so I was kind of getting off on something. The Lord stopped me. And so I just said, Lord, what is this all about? What is happening here? Why are we going off the gold? Why did we go off the gold standard? Why is all of this happening? Why are we now in debt and stuff? And he says, okay, here's how it is. He says, you're not thinking strategically enough. Well, okay, when he says that, then I guess the answer is that's true. I'm not thinking strategically enough. Okay, Lord, how do I need to be thinking about this strategically? He said, when you have a fixed value for your money, then that by its nature is constraining to the one who does not want to be constrained. And so it's not elastic enough to be able to take care of the full opportunity that is present. He said, remember, the nature of knowledge is that it promises you something in the short term in exchange for long-term destruction. So it will promise you something of benefit that will entice you to act on it, but that benefit actually produces long-term destruction. So such is the way with the economic system. The economic system that's built on a fixed basis does not have the elasticity that people who want short-term results will tolerate. Debt allows for, has sufficient, the way you described it, an economic system built on the basis of debt has enough elasticity to be able to produce an almost infinite amount of production in a very, very short period of time. So it promises short-term and a short-term explosion of value, but its long-term outcome is destruction.
Yep.
So that's the first thing. It provides short-term benefit through the elasticity of debt that enables there to be an explosion of benefit in the short term. He said the other thing, though, from a strategic standpoint, is that debt is a mechanism of enslavement. And so from a spiritual strategic standpoint, if individuals in exchange for short-term benefits will then enslave themselves to the element of debt, then what happens is that those who are controlling that system have the ability to enslave the totality of those who are operating in that system. What is on your dollar bill? Your dollar bill says Federal Reserve note. What is a note?
A debt
It is
instrument.
a debt instrument. So we are trading in debt. Well, then who is the collateral for the debt? I don't know, Lord. Who is the collateral for the debt? That was a hard one for me. He said, You are.
Yep.
You are the collateral for the debt. And as he was describing all of that, then the day came where I understood that when I heard those in Congress say, you know, the full faith and credit of the United States government, what they were saying, they will incur debt, promising those whom they secure the debt from that they can reach into the U.S. population, American population at any time and extract for them whatever they want because they are the collateral for the debt.
When we see that happening, I don't know that a lot of people understand the nature of inflation and this idea of what comes with printing more and debasing your currency, but you literally reach into the pocket. And what is if money is a proxy for people's labor, you're actually going and stealing their labor. You're stealing it from them directly. It's a I think when
It's
you come to
profit
realize
taking.
it, yeah,
It's
yeah,
profit taking. That's all inflation and interest. All this stuff is nothing more than profit taking. I mean, this is not intended to be political in any way, but just observing, just taking time to observe what's happening. So Trump comes in, takes a lot of the shackles off. There's all kinds of wealth starting to be transferred, to the middle class. And what happens the moment he's expelled from office? There is a re-extraction happening, and not only is the extraction greater, happening to reclaim, it's now expanding. And so it's like, well, wait a minute, how is that working? Why? Go back to the slide. Because we are the wealth producers. And on the left side of the slide, the wealth producers exist for the sole purpose of producing wealth for those who control that wealth. The wealth producers can have the benefit of the cost of wealth. They do not get the benefit of the production of wealth.
yep.
The left side of the slide will not tolerate that. And
Well, and then you look
so,
at the pandemic, and you look at the redistribution that happened during that time, and I listened to folks at the World Economic Forum and all of the things that have kind of proceeded from those events. I mean, it reminds me of 9/11 as well with the Patriot Act and such, is that more and more and more this heavy hand has reached in. And you think about how many businesses were destroyed, right? How many things that, and I think about never let a crisis go to waste.
yeah,
They have used these crises to make people more dependent. And of course, 15-minute cities, you'll own nothing and be happy. All of these visions that they have out in the open is, it's as clear of modern day slavery as anything I've seen. And that's what's amazing to me about the fact that we're having this conversation on a crypto channel as we talk about these things is extremely relevant right now. What's happening, and the fact that we even have an opportunity to push back in any sort of way that I think even people that are not listening to Jesus can actually understand. They can say, "Wow, yeah, I see how this fits together."
yeah, I've shared it with folks on the channel here before that if we in any kind of mass, the light went on for us that who we are and what we're designed to be. This thing could be over literally in a month, and that's not I haven't said that to be exaggerating or blustering or any of that kind of stuff, to make, exorbitant comments. It's like, what the heck happened to Nineveh? Nineveh turned around in a heartbeat. They heard, they said, whoop, boom, and turned around instantly. And so we underestimate the power of the divine aha, if I can put it in that way. And you said it, open in the opening of the episode today. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yep.
And so here we are. What are we talking about? We're talking about what's obvious. And we're also talking about what has not been so obvious, but that is becoming obvious. And that is that we are sons of the Most High God. We are.
Yep.
Government is a construct of us, not the other way around. And so once that simple concept registers, then it's like, oh, wait a minute, what are we doing here? Is this really what we want to do? Okay, is this really what we want to submit to? No. The government was designed and constructed to produce a more perfect union. How is the government doing? Are they accomplishing a more perfect union? Well, first of all, there is no union. So how could it be perfect? We're divided on every level. Okay, check one, they're not doing the job that they were created to do. So you go all the way down the list, all into the first 10 amendments, and you can say, no. And what then happened? There was a redefining of the first 10 amendments to call them the Bill of Rights. Do you know that you cannot find who first coined the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights? You can't find it. See, it is just asserted to now be called the Bill of Rights. Well, if it's a Bill of Rights, who is granting the rights? Okay. Now we're into the naming rights deal again. Oh, so we look at the Bill of Rights and the Constitution like that. That's a flipping of the purpose. No. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights delineate the limitations of government's authority to act on behalf of the people, and their job is to accomplish certain outcomes on our behalf. They don't define our rights. They define the limitations of authority that we delegate to the government to serve us. Well, is that how it's working today? No. Why? Because it's operating on the left side of the slide. See, it's operating in the upside down world. And the upside down world does what? It extracts, it exploits, it enslaves, it punishes for non-compliance. See? And it's built on the illusion of scarcity. Well, folks, I'd like to change that. How about you?
Yeah, let's do it. It's funny, as you mentioned before, ruling and reigning. And I think it's really interesting what you just said. You think about what do you have authority over, right? What's your sphere of influence? And let's say you're in your home and you're married and you have kids. You talked about this idea of reigning, and I love that the term reign and the water that reigns, right?
Yeah.
Of provision is so similar. And this idea that you do that willingly, right? So you submit yourself willingly and it is raining on you.
Yes.
And you reign over those who are willing subjects, if you will. You're saying, hey, no, we're going to do this in collaboration.
Yeah.
Well, when you get out of hand, I have to rule over you. And I look at the system. You make a really good point about the Bill of Rights. You go back to the Declaration of Independence. We find these things to be self-evident, these rights to be self-evident, right? That, that we were given these things by a creator. These are obvious to us, and they come from the creator, not from the government. But to see that over time, this incrementalism of saying, no, we are ruling over you in power and authority over you. And it's like, hold on, you have to recognize that you're submitting to that. And I think this upside down world, we've talked about the garden of giving over this transaction of your authority is no, we do not submit underneath this rulership of this Bill of Rights. We recognize our sovereignty over it because these things are not given to us by the state. These are things that are given to us by Creator, and you are actually in the downline government
Yes.
of our sovereignty. And it's coming to a head, Steve. I mean,
Yes,
I
it
see it,
is.
and you think about all these pieces together. And now I'm going to get a little weird right as we wrap up because I got to wrap up a little earlier than normal. There's a lot happening in our world today, Steve, and
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw out a couple of them.
Yeah.
Number one, the money's changing and it's becoming digital. There are those who are taking advantage of that transition and that system to create a more um, enslaving system than it already is. And there are those who we see on one hand, we see it falling apart and potentially collapsing under its own weight. And we see people scrambling to try to find a way to have this great reset in which you will own nothing and I will own everything. And we see this left and right hand side of the slide. If you're paying attention, you can't unsee it. But then you also see, which I think is wonderful, it's almost like it is has its other end of the spectrum, which is opportunity. And it's interesting how you've talked about before, there's this partnership that the mode of transport of the glory of God is his man.
Yeah.
And that here are these tools, and here is this time, and here are these things that we can animate. And I think about the Compassion Cartel. I think about our channel. I think about the folks that we talk to. I think about, what's at the basis of all of this community and its care and concern for one another. And what would the outcome potentially be? And this idea of a transfer of not only the transfer of the man's heart, my heart, to Jesus himself, right? That I would literally come up underneath his authority and I would wear his ring and his robe and I would do what he asks me to do. And in that, let the free flowing of his provision. Um, it's amazing to me where we sit because very practical things are about to happen. Right now, we've got Russia threatening nuclear war and pushing things to an edge. And, out of Russia, you hear, hey, we'd like to settle this. This is not about land. This is about let's stop this fighting and killing. You've got a whole group of people dead set on, destroying Russia and claiming all of their resources and land and, overthrowing this group. We see disclosure around this whole alien thing, right? We're going to see some amazing things coming up in February where we're going to see people with firsthand knowledge of biologics and crafts come in front of Congress and share what they, not just David Grush, but like actual people. We're seeing that exposure, which is, potentially one of the biggest realizations of civilization to this point of realizing, hey, there's more to this story. Now, I think we're going to actually see it in alignment with what God has said since the beginning, but there's a lot of change that's happening. And it, for me, I can't help but think that it's all interconnected and interrelated and that it is intentional and that it must actually fail. What are your thoughts as far as so many different things from so many different angles are coming at us that I think there's a lot of people who are very fearful.
Yeah.
And I think that that's actually a strategy of, Satan to basically get you to be just, just hunker down, get out of the game, be afraid. I find it exhilarating, Steve,
Yeah.
that we would be able to play a role to say, hell, and this isn't by my own hands. He is doing something greater here. And this is a big, big, big opportunity for us to come in alignment with him because he is literally about to turn the tables over.
Yeah.
And we may see soon a whole new system. And I don't mean just economics. I mean his kingdom come. I mean this whole transfer thing. What say you, Steve?
Well, all the pieces are there for us to participate. We've mentioned Carter on the phone on the stream here a number of times.
Yep.
Well, Carter's been assigned to build something that's bigger than he is. He spent 7 years trying to even describe it, learn about it so he could even describe it. And yet Jesus is wanting him to build something. Um, well, why is that? Well, so that there would be a place to operate, a place to function. What is he doing with you? He's talking to you about unlocking global generosity. Well, okay, you can have the concept of unlocking global generosity, but what does that actually mean? Well, if it's to unlock it, what is it that's locking it up? What's keeping that from happening? What is the mechanism internally that gives way for that generosity to occur? What does it mean to be generous in the kingdom? Oh, what is the means by which this is happening? So you know, you've got, you've got assignment. You've got to, there's a place to operate. There is a means, to accomplish it. There are the resources that are necessary to bring it about. Um, then there is the location on the planet for it to begin to function. Like a seed being sown. The seed is exactly is the picture again.
Yep.
It seems so insignificant at the moment, but what it has to have is it has to move from where it is and have the means by which it can then be transported into the soil, the location, and then allow the soil to function with the natural means by which God created it to actually expand. That's the location. So if we look at this and we say, hey, kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, okay, and we've been received, there are a number of us that have been received assignments in that role, then hey, let's start getting our heads together and seeing what portion of the macro objective that God has assigned to each one of us and start working together to actually accomplish that. Build the place, build the means, gather the resources, identify the objectives, and then the location to begin the process. And let's begin. Let's just begin. The left-hand side of the slide is going to disintegrate. I mean, one last comment there. Think about what most people who are familiar with the book of Revelation are terrified about. They are terrified about the mark of the beast. They're terrified about what they call the tribulation period. But what they don't, and then they casually talk about the collapse of Babylon, both religious and economic, occurring in an hour, and people begging that the rocks would fall on them. Will somebody please tell me what kind of a threat a person who is begging for rocks to fall on them is? What kind of a threat is that? No, that's a person who has so given up and is so captured by fear that it's begging for a quick exit. Yep. It's begging for the creation to destroy them. Well, I've never met a person like that who represents a threat to me. That's a person who has been totally consumed by fear. They're not a threat to me. So if we look at what we've been told about what's happening in the book of Revelation, that is to instill fear in us when there is no fear. If you see it the right way, it's whoa. That's telling us that there is an incredible opportunity to work with Jesus to accomplish what he has set out to accomplish, which is that his man would learn to rule his creation with him in the fullness of his father's nature and character. Well, that's not a person who's begging for the rocks to fall on him.
Right.
That's not a person who is a part of the system that's getting ready to collapse. That is a person who is learning to hook their wagon with Jesus, where heaven and earth are joined together as one. That's what I want to participate in. And the means and the mechanisms are coming together for us to actually do that.
Yep.
So I don't know if that says anything to anybody, but that's where I am anyway.
Episode 24 in the books. Steve, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for that. You know what I love about it is like going on a roller coaster that you have no idea. It's like in the dark and you're like, whoa, which way is it going to go now? I love it. I love it so much. Thanks for doing this again. We'll wrap this thing up, but thank you so much for all that you do. And folks, I hope this is an encouragement to you, because I find that when I discipline myself to do this with Steve, I always learn something new, many things. So thank you again, Steve.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you for having me. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Wow. Once again, we have seen something new. And, you know, I'm so thankful for this time, you know, and I've gotten so much out of just talking with Steve, you know, one-on-one, that, you know, we wanted to do this in public. And I hope that it's a blessing to you and challenges your thinking as well. But I think it's not just, hey, some guys want to stream. I really think that this is the appointed time for this information so that people would understand who he is. You know, I can't help but think about that first miracle that was in the Bible, you know, that basically they're at a wedding feast, right? And, you know, Jesus' mom's like, hey, man, yeah, I know you can do the wine. And he says, my time is not yet come. What's amazing about every miracle that Jesus ever did is everyone, I mean, Lazarus calling him out, it's like, pay attention to what I'm about to do, is to reveal who he was. And I think about the difficulty that we're going to go through, the people that are worried and fearful of the rocks falling on them. This message is a message of hope. And like Steve said, I want to live this way. Well, I think about it is the only time I was able to really pay attention to the one who had the real answers is when I had exhausted all of my other options. And I feel like a lot of systems failing is just around you going, hey, these things that I used to rely on are not reliable, because there's only one who is reliable. And that's kind of where I'm at, is that let this burn, let this collapse, because what happens is those that the Lord has provided for will be looked to. And the question is, how are you going to animate it? How are you going to speak of this? Are you going to make his name known? Because in my opinion, it's not about riches. He's using the money to get your attention. And it may be either from having none of it or having a bunch of it, or somewhere in between. But there's a story and a lesson in all of this stuff. And I'm just so thankful that that I'm getting to learn these lessons, because I feel like it's in preparation for something very important. And I hope that you see it as well. We live in consequential times, and you have a purpose. There's a plan for your life that was designed since the very beginning. You are not an accident. You're not the descendant of a monkey. Folks, thanks for tuning in today. Have a great weekend, and we will catch you next time. Take care.